In today's breaking story, the Senate has dropped a bombshell on Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas based on his actions that are so egregious, the Associated Press describes them as the worst in history, and I have the full story for you next. For some context, please have a look at this compilation I prepared for you that touches on Thomas's damning deeds that outraged Democrats while Republicans remain muted.
Clarence Thomas must resign.
I'm just a civil servant.
And if he doesn't, well, if there was ever a case to impeach a Supreme Court justice, this is it. Enough is enough. Supreme Court justices clearly can't be trusted to police themselves, and Chief Justice Roberts has shown little interest in holding justices to account for numerous conflicts of interest. The Supreme Court is facing a serious legitimacy crisis, and failing to hold Thomas accountable will only make it worse.
Watch as Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez lights a fire under him during this year's impeachment hearings against him and Justice Alito.
Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has officially filed articles of impeachment against Justices Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas. That comes just after Senators Sheldon Whitehouse and Ron Wyden made a formal request to DOJ. They want a special counsel appointed to criminally investigate Supreme Court Justice Thomas.
As you rightly point out, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez from New York City, and she's filed 2 articles of impeachment against Justice Samuel Alito and Justice Clarence Thomas. And these articles of impeachment are not based in any of the decisions that either of these 2 justices have made, but instead specifically about their conduct around the office. These are very specific accusations that Ocasio-Cortez is leveling against these 2 Supreme Court justices. It comes at a time where Democrats are getting increasingly frustrated about the direction of the court, obviously the decisions that this court has rendered over the past couple of months, but also the conduct of these Supreme Court justices and the lack of oversight that they apparently seem to have without any kind of specific code of ethics that they must follow.
The proof is undeniable, and here I will lay it out. Justice Clarence Thomas, for decades now, has carried on a close, financially entangled personal relationship with real estate billionaire Harlan Crow. It is of material importance to the American people to note that Justice Thomas's relationship to the billionaire only began after Thomas's powerful appointment to our nation's highest court. In total, Justice Thomas appears to have received more than $1.5 million worth in goods, cash equivalents, and services from Mr. Crow. And that is just what we know of.
And that's just what we know of, is what AOC said back in July during the hearings. And that brings us forward to today because we know more. Check out the headline in this Associated Press article that appeared on Fortune's website that read, "Gifts accepted by Clarence Thomas have no comparison in modern history, Senate Democrats say." The 93-page report released Saturday by the Democratic majority of the Senate Judiciary Committee found additional travel taken in 2021 by Thomas, but not reported on his annual financial disclosure form. A private jet flight to New York's Adirondacks in July, and a jet and yacht trip to New York City sponsored by billionaire Harlan Crow in October, one of more than 24 times detailed in the report that Thomas took luxury travel and gifts from wealthy benefactors. Thomas has said he was not required to disclose the trips that he and his wife Ginny took with Crow because the big donor is a close friend of the family, and disclosure of that type of travel was not previously required. The new ethics code does not explicitly require it, and Thomas has since gone back and reported some travel. The report traces back to Justice Scalia, saying he established the practice of accepting undisclosed gifts and hundreds of trips over his decades on the bench. The late Justice Bader Ginsburg and retired Justice Breyer also took paid-for trips but disclosed them on their annual forms. The investigation found that Thomas has accepted gifts and travel from wealthy benefactors worth more than $4.75 million by some estimates since his 1991 confirmation, and failed to disclose much of it. The number, value, and extravagance of the gifts accepted by Justice Thomas have no comparison in modern American history, according to the report. The reaction from Democrats has been that of outrage. The highest court in the land can't have the lowest ethical standards, the committee Chairman Illinois Senator Dick Durbin said in a statement. He has long called for an enforceable code of ethics. The key phrase for me in the report was that Thomas reported some travel. Selective reporting, as opposed to full disclosure, is what someone does when they're trying to create the illusion of compliance with what is known while trying to hide the even more egregious things that are unknown. And now the number that AOC reported back in July as over $1 million has ballooned to over $4 million. Not a bad perk for a man with a salary of $285,000. But who are we kidding? It's not just a perk, it's an ethical bribe under our current system, and it reveals just how corrupt the system is. And any change to it is unlikely as Republicans prepare to take control of the Senate in January and will oppose any restrictions to the separate branch of government that supports their conservative agenda. And I will give House Leader Hakeem Jeffries the final word to put an exclamation point on the Democrat outrage over this unethical injustice of supreme proportions.
Samuel Alito and Clarence Thomas are totally out of control. These individuals continue to detonate the credibility of the United States Supreme Court. Part of the problem that we confront is that the Supreme Court has chosen to conduct itself as if the judiciary is above the law. In America, no one is above the law. That includes the Supreme Court, that includes Samuel Alito, and that includes Clarence Thomas. If the Supreme Court does not get its act under control, you can be confident that Democrats in the House of Representatives, partnering with Democrats in the United States Senate, will act the first opportunity we have to engage in thorough oversight and the consideration of imposing an ethical code of conduct on Supreme Court justices.